The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from dozens of species gathered in emergency session. The massive crystalline dome overhead cast prismatic light across worried faces, tentacles, and other appendages as the assembled delegates discussed the growing human problem. Supreme Commander of the Empire stood at the center podium, his four arms gesturing emphatically. His species had ruled this sector for their purple skin and towering frames commanding respect wherever they went. Today, however, even his usually confident demeanor showed cracks of concern. Fellow council members, his voice boomed through the translator network, the humans have gone too far. Their expansion into the arm has disrupted trade routes that have existed for 10,000 years. Their ships move with impunity through space we have claimed for generations. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. They clicked their mandibles in synchronized disapproval, while the gaseous ethereals pulsed with agitated colors. Each species had their own grievances against the newcomers who called themselves humans. Ambassador Quill of the Federation rose from her crystalline perch, her translucent form shimmering with anxiety. The humans have established colonies in 17 systems within our traditional sphere of influence. When we sent diplomatic envoys to discuss territorial agreements, they simply ignored us. Ignored? The word came from General Thorax of the Collective, his compound eyes glittering with indignation. They did worse than ignore our hive ships. They laughed at our warning displays and continued mining operations in the asteroid fields of sacred memory. Nodded grimly. This is precisely why we must act. These humans appeared barely 200 rotations ago, emerging from some backwater system they call Sol. They have no understanding of galactic politics, no respect for established borders, and no fear of consequences. The discussion had been building for months. Humanity's rapid expansion had caught everyone off guard. Most new species took to develop faster than light travel, longer still to establish interstellar colonies. Humans had accomplished both in what the galaxy considered an impossible. Their technology is primitive, scoffed Admiral Al of the Aquatic Dominion, water cascading from his gill slits as he spoke. Carbon steel hulls, chemical propulsion systems, crude energy weapons. They should not pose any significant threat to our advanced civilizations. And yet, replied, his tone darkening, their ships keep appearing in new systems every rotation. Their colonies spring up like fungal infections, spreading faster than our intelligence networks can track. The real problem, though none would admit it publicly, was that humanity's chaotic expansion threatened the careful balance of power that had maintained galactic peace for eons. The council members had fought wars, established treaties, and divided territory through of careful negotiation. Humans simply took what they wanted and dared anyone to stop them. I propose we send a clear message, continued. We select our finest military assets and demonstrate the futility of human expansion. One decisive show of force will bring them to the negotiating table where they belong. The proposal sparked heated debate. Some council members favored economic sanctions, others preferred diplomatic pressure. But as reports continued arriving of new human settlements and mining operations, even the most peaceful species began to see the wisdom in this approach. Elder of the Pacifist Collective, a being of pure energy who rarely spoke in council sessions, finally addressed the assembly. If force must be used, let it be overwhelming and decisive. We do not wish to begin a war, merely end human expansion before it destabilizes everything we have built. The vote was unanimous. The galaxy's greatest military powers would contribute their finest vessels and most experienced crews to form an armada unlike anything seen in living memory. It would be a force so impressive, so undeniably powerful, that humanity would have no choice but to submit to galactic authority. Admiral Al volunteered the Leviathan-class dreadnought Tide of Eternity, equipped with gravitational manipulation weapons capable of crushing entire moons. General Thorax contributed 3 hive-mind battle cruisers, each one a living organism bred specifically for warfare. The ethereals offered their phase-shifting destroyers that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Himself would command the flagship Eternal Dominion, a massive vessel housing enough firepower to glass entire planets. Its quantum torpedoes could tear holes in space-time itself, while its defensive systems had never been breached in 500 years of service. We shall target their colony, announced as the fleet composition was finalized. The system they call New Geneva. It represents their furthest expansion into our territory and serves as a supply hub for their mining operations. Once we demonstrate our power there, word will spread to every human settlement. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. The combined fleet would emerge from hyperspace in perfect formation, weapons powered and shields raised. The display alone would be enough to convince the humans of their insignificance. If that failed, a few precise strikes on military installations would drive the point home without excessive casualties. Preparations began immediately. The greatest shipyards in the galaxy worked around the clock to ensure every vessel was in peak condition. Elite crews were assembled from across dozens of species, each bringing their unique advantages to the fleet. They contributed their strategic brilliance, their perfect coordination, the ethereals their technological superiority. Within weeks, nearly 200 warships had assembled at the neutral staging point in the void between stars. The fleet stretched across thousands of kilometers, each vessel a masterwork of military engineering. Some had served in the Great Purge that eliminated the Scourge parasites. Others had fought in the dimensional wars against reality-eating entities from beyond normal space. Commander's tactical officer reviewed the intelligence reports one final time. The human colony consists of approximately 50,000 individuals spread across 3 primary settlements. Their defensive capabilities are limited to a handful of orbital platforms mounting primitive kinetic weapons. Hardly worth our attention, mused, studying holographic displays of the target system. Their largest vessels appear to be cargo haulers converted for basic patrol duties, nothing that could threaten even our escort frigates. The intelligence painted a picture of typical human improvisation. Where other species built proper defensive installations, humans had converted mining equipment into weapon platforms. Instead of purpose-built warships, they relied on civilian vessels hastily armed with whatever they could mount on the hulls. Their communications traffic suggests they are aware of our approach, reported. Long-range sensors detected our scout ships 3 days ago. They have been broadcasting requests for reinforcement to other human settlements. Allowed himself a predatory smile. Excellent. Let them call for help. When their reinforcements arrive to find our fleet in control of their system, the lesson will be even more effective. The fleet made its final preparations for the jump to New Geneva. Weapon systems were brought online, shields were raised to full power, and communication arrays were tuned to broadcast surrender terms in the primitive human languages. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. What none of the Council forces knew was that humanity had been expecting them for months. Human intelligence networks, dismissed as primitive by galactic standards, had been tracking the fleet's assembly from the beginning. More importantly, they had been preparing a response that would forever change the galaxy's understanding of what it meant to fight humans. As the Council Armada prepared to demonstrate galactic superiority, humanity was about to teach them a lesson in warfare that would echo through history. The galaxy's best fighters were indeed about to be deployed, but they would discover that humans had a very different definition of what constituted their best response to threats. The stage was set for a confrontation that would either see humanity bow to galactic authority or prove that sometimes the players in the game had the most dangerous tricks to play. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, confident in their overwhelming advantage and certain of their victory. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The Council Armada dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation around the New Geneva system. Nearly 200 warships materialized in a display of coordinated precision that had taken months to choreograph. Each vessel took its assigned position in a massive sphere designed to encompass the entire star system. Supreme Commander stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, watching the tactical displays with satisfaction. The human colony lay before them, as vulnerable as intelligence reports had suggested. 3 small worlds, a handful of orbital stations, and perhaps 20 patrol craft that looked more like armed merchant vessels than proper warships. Open communications channels, commanded. Let us deliver our message to these humans. The transmission went out on all frequencies, translated into the crude human languages by the fleet's department. People of New Geneva, this is Supreme Commander of the Galactic Council Defense Force. You have unlawfully expanded into territory claimed by member species of the Council. You will cease all military operations and prepare to receive terms for your withdrawal from this system. The response came quickly, broadcast from what appeared to be the colony's primary orbital station. The voice was calm, almost conversational, speaking in the harsh consonants of what the translation matrix identified as English. "Commander, this is Governor Sarah of New Geneva Colony. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. This system was unclaimed when we arrived, and we've established legitimate settlements under human colonial law. We're not going anywhere." Commander's four eyes widened in disbelief. Are they truly refusing to negotiate, with our entire fleet arrayed against them? Felt a flash of anger at the human arrogance. Perhaps a demonstration is required. Target their largest orbital station with a warning shot, something impressive but non-lethal. The tide of eternity aligned its gravitational manipulation arrays, charging the weapons that could alter the very fabric of space. The target was a mining station hanging in orbit around the second planet, its industrial bulk bristling with converted excavation equipment. The shot lanced out, a visible distortion in space-time that would pass close enough to the station to demonstrate the fleet's power without actually damaging it. The gravitational pulse was calibrated to create spectacular light effects as it interacted with the station's metal hull. What happened next would be analyzed by military academies for generations to come. As the gravitational pulse approached its target, the mining station suddenly wasn't where it was supposed to be. Instead of hanging motionless in orbit, it had somehow moved several thousand kilometers in the span of seconds, causing the warning shot to sail harmlessly past. "Impossible," breathed Admiral Al over the fleet communication network. "No vessel that size could accelerate that quickly without being torn apart by the forces involved." But even as he spoke, more impossibilities began manifesting throughout the system. The human patrol craft that had appeared so primitive suddenly displayed acceleration profiles that known physics. Cargo vessels began moving in patterns that suggested thruster arrays far more powerful than anything their hulls should have been able to mount. "Commander," reported urgently, "our long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. The humans appear to be powering up equipment we didn't know they possessed." Studied the tactical displays with growing unease. What had initially appeared to be a few dozen human vessels was beginning to look like something far more complex. Ships that had registered as inert were coming online with power signatures that matched military-grade systems. "Analysis suggests the humans have been running in stealth mode," the tactical officer continued. "Their true fleet strength appears to be significantly higher than our intelligence indicated." The communication channel crackled with Governor's voice again, still maintaining that infuriatingly casual tone. "Commander, I want to give you one opportunity to reconsider your position. Our system defense grid is now fully active, and I'd hate for there to be any unfortunate misunderstandings." System defense grid? Intelligence had identified no such installations. Yet as watched, his sensors began detecting energy signatures emerging from what had appeared to be empty space. Cloaked installations were powering up throughout the system, their weapons arrays coming online with the distinctive signatures of antimatter containment systems. "Sir," his voice carried a note of genuine concern, "we're reading antimatter reactors going active all throughout the system. The humans appear to have hidden defensive installations on every major asteroid, moon, and planetary body in the system." The strategic situation was changing rapidly. What had begun as an overwhelming show of force against a primitive colony was starting to look more like a carefully prepared trap. The humans had somehow managed to turn their entire star system into a fortress without anyone in galactic intelligence noticing. "How is this possible?" demanded General Thorax over the fleet network. "Our scouts reported no significant military installations. Our intelligence indicated primitive defensive capabilities at best." The answer came from an unexpected source. One of the human patrol craft had moved to within communication range of the battle cruisers, and its captain was broadcasting on an open channel. "General Thorax, this is Captain of the New Geneva Defense Force. Your scouts saw exactly what we wanted them to see. You've been operating under the assumption that humans build defenses the same way you do. Permanent installations, obvious military signatures, conventional deployment patterns. You never considered that we might have learned a few tricks during our expansion that you hadn't encountered before." The implications were staggering. If humanity had developed stealth technology advanced enough to fool the galaxy's best intelligence services, what other capabilities might they be hiding? The careful balance of power that the Council relied upon was based on known technological capabilities and established military doctrines. Commander, reported with obvious strain in his voice, we're detecting additional fleet signatures emerging from the outer system, multiple vessels approaching at high velocity from beyond sensor range. The reinforcements Governor had called for were arriving, but these weren't the converted cargo haulers and mining ships the Council had expected. The approaching signatures matched the energy profiles of purpose-built warships, and there were far more of them than intelligence suggested humanity possessed. Sir, we're reading at least 50 vessels inbound, the tactical officer continued. Power signatures suggest heavy cruiser-class vessels at minimum. Some of the contacts appear to be significantly larger. Felt the first stirrings of genuine concern. The strategic situation had shifted from overwhelming advantage to something approaching parity, and the humans still hadn't revealed the full extent of their capabilities. Every assumption the Council had made about human military capacity was proving incorrect. Open a secure channel to all fleet commanders, ordered. I want a complete tactical assessment of our current position. The reports that came in painted an increasingly troubling picture. The human defensive installations weren't just numerous, they were sophisticated. Stealth technology that could fool Council sensors, antimatter power systems that matched anything in the galactic arsenal, and coordination between widely dispersed assets that suggested communication technology far more advanced than anyone had given humans credit for. The humans appear to have been preparing for this confrontation for some time, Admiral Al reported from his position, commanding the Aquatic Dominion contingent. Their defensive positions are perfectly sited to create overlapping fields of fire throughout the inner system. More concerning, added the ethereal phase commander Al, their energy signatures suggest weapons technology we don't recognize. The antimatter containment patterns are unlike anything in our databases. Realized with growing alarm that the Council had walked into the kind of strategic situation their military academies warned against. They had committed their forces based on incomplete intelligence against an opponent who had been preparing specifically for their arrival. Governor, broadcast, trying to maintain diplomatic control of the situation. It appears there have been significant intelligence failures on both sides. Perhaps we should discuss terms before any regrettable actions are taken. The human's response was immediate and carried an undertone that was beginning to recognize as characteristic human stubbornness. Commander, the terms are simple. Your fleet withdraws from our system, and we pretend this whole thing never happened. Everyone goes home, nobody gets hurt, and we can work out our territorial disputes through proper diplomatic channels. But even as Governor spoke, the tactical situation continued to evolve. The human reinforcement fleet was arriving in waves, each group larger than the last. What had started as 50 contacts had grown to over 100, then 200, then more than the Council fleet's sensors could reliably track. Sir, reported with barely controlled panic, we're detecting what appears to be an entire human battle fleet. Multiple capital ships, escort vessels, and support craft. Total count is approaching our own fleet's strength. The impossible was happening before their eyes. Humanity, which had been dismissed as a minor colonial power with primitive technology, had assembled a fleet that matched the combined might of the galaxy's greatest military powers. Worse, they had done so in a matter of hours, suggesting logistics capabilities that shouldn't have been possible for a species so new to interstellar politics. Howe whispered more to himself than to his officers. How did we get this so wrong? The answer would come to define humanity's reputation throughout the galaxy for generations to come. As the Council fleet found itself facing an opponent they had completely misunderstood, they were about to discover that humans had spent their brief time in galactic space learning very different lessons than anyone had expected. The stage was set for a confrontation that would either see the Council forces withdraw in confusion or escalate into the kind of battle that would reshape galactic politics forever. And deep in the command centers of the approaching human fleet, decisions were being made that would determine whether the galaxy's greatest fighters would live to tell the tale of their encounter with humanity's true military capabilities. The human reinforcement fleet completed its arrival with a precision that would have impressed Council military observers under different circumstances. Over 300 vessels had materialized in perfect formation, each one taking a predetermined position in a vast defensive sphere that encompassed the entire New Geneva system. Supreme Commander stared at the tactical displays in stunned silence. The impossible had become reality. Humanity, dismissed as a primitive species barely worthy of galactic attention, had assembled a fleet that not only matched Council's strength, but appeared to surpass it in several critical areas. "Final count, sir," Commander reported, his voice carefully controlled. 317 human vessels confirmed. Multiple capital ship classes, extensive escort formations, and specialized support craft we can't identify from our databases. The numbers told a story that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about human capabilities. This wasn't a hastily assembled defense force of converted civilian ships. This was a purpose-built military fleet that had been constructed, trained, and positioned specifically for this confrontation. How did they mobilize so quickly? Admiral Al demanded over the fleet communication network. Our intelligence indicated it should take humans months to coordinate fleet movements across multiple star systems. The answer came from an unexpected source. One of the human capital ships had moved to within optimal communication range, and its captain was broadcasting on diplomatic channels. The ship itself was massive, easily matching the size of its flagship, with weapon arrays that radiated power signatures the Council's sensors couldn't fully analyze. "Admiral Al, this is Admiral Torres of the Human Defense Fleet. To answer your question, we've been expecting this confrontation for 6 months. Your fleet assembly wasn't nearly as secret as you imagined. Human intelligence networks have been tracking your preparations since the first preliminary meetings in the Council chambers." The implications were staggering. If humanity had intelligence capabilities sophisticated enough to monitor classified Council deliberations, what other assumptions about human primitiveness were equally wrong? "Moreover," Admiral Torres continued, "we've spent the last 2 years establishing rapid response protocols throughout human space. What you're seeing isn't an impossible mobilization. It's a carefully planned defensive strategy designed specifically to counter the kind of overwhelming force doctrine the Council typically employs." Felt his confidence crumbling as he realized the scope of his miscalculation. The humans hadn't just prepared for this confrontation, they had studied Council military doctrine and developed countermeasures. This wasn't primitive, stubborn resistance. This was sophisticated strategic planning. "Sir," reported urgently, "we're detecting energy buildups throughout the human formation. They appear to be charging weapons systems." The tactical displays lit up with power signatures as the human fleet prepared for battle. But these weren't the primitive kinetic weapons Council intelligence had identified. The energy patterns matched antimatter, quantum field manipulation, and exotic matter containment systems that should have been beyond human technological capabilities. "Council fleet," Governor's voice carried across all frequencies. "This is your final warning. Withdraw from our system immediately, or we will consider your presence an act of war." The moment had arrived that would define the future relationship between humanity and the galactic community. Faced an impossible choice. Withdraw and admit that the Council's most powerful fleet had been intimidated by a species they had dismissed as insignificant, or escalate into a battle against an opponent whose true capabilities remained unknown. "All ships prepare for combat operations," commanded, making the decision that would echo through galactic history. "We cannot allow this challenge to Council authority to stand unanswered." The battle began with the kind of fury that military historians would struggle to adequately describe. The Council fleet opened with a coordinated barrage designed to overwhelm human defenses through sheer volume of fire. Gravitational weapons, quantum torpedoes, and dimensional phase projectors filled space with destructive energies that had shattered entire fleets in previous conflicts. The human response demonstrated why they had become the galaxy's most dangerous unknown quantity. Instead of meeting the Council attack head-on, human vessels scattered in patterns that seemed chaotic but quickly revealed themselves as precisely coordinated maneuvers. Ships that should have been destroyed by direct hits simply weren't where the targeting computers expected them to be. "Impossible acceleration profiles," General Thorax reported over increasingly frantic communication channels. "Human vessels are changing velocity and direction at rates that should their crews." The answer came in the form of technology the Council had never encountered. Human ships weren't just fast, they were employing some form of inertial manipulation that allowed organic crews to survive maneuvers that should have been lethal. It was as if they had solved fundamental problems of physics that had limited every other species in the galaxy. But speed was only part of the human advantage. As the battle intensified, their weapons proved to be far more sophisticated than intelligence had suggested. Antimatter streams that could penetrate Council shielding, quantum disruptors that interfered with the fundamental forces holding ships together, and something entirely new that the surviving Council records would later classify as reality anchoring technology. Sir reported with barely controlled panic, the battle cruiser Living Victory has been destroyed. The humans somehow bypassed its bioarmor completely. The loss of a battle cruiser should have been impossible. Their living hulls could adapt to any known weapon system, evolving defenses in real time during combat. The fact that human weapons could bypass such sophisticated defensive systems suggested technological capabilities that shouldn't have existed. The ethereal phase destroyer Whisper of Eternity is reporting critical damage, came another report. Human weapons are somehow targeting them while their phase shifted into alternate dimensions. That was even more concerning. Ethereal phase shift technology was considered the ultimate defensive system, allowing ships to exist partially outside normal space-time. If humans had developed weapons that could target vessels in multiple dimensions simultaneously, it represented a fundamental advancement in military technology. The battle raged for hours, but the outcome was becoming increasingly clear. The Council fleet, despite its overwhelming initial advantages, was being systematically dismantled by human forces that seemed to counter every weapon system and tactical doctrine in the galactic arsenal. Admiral Torres, broadcast on diplomatic channels as his flagship shook under the impact of human weapons, "What do you want? What are your terms?" The human response was immediate and surprisingly moderate. "Commander, our terms remain unchanged. Your fleet withdraws from human space, and we establish proper diplomatic relations through standard interstellar protocols. We never wanted this fight, but we're prepared to finish it." But even as Admiral Torres spoke, the tactical situation continued to deteriorate for Council forces. Human weapons were proving not just effective, but terrifyingly precise. Instead of destroying ships outright, they were systematically disabling key systems, leaving Council vessels helpless but largely intact. "They're not trying to kill us," realized with growing horror. "They're demonstrating that they could if they wanted to." The implications were more frightening than simple destruction. Any species could build weapons capable of annihilating their enemies. It took far more sophisticated technology to selectively disable opposing forces while keeping casualties to a minimum. The humans were displaying a level of precision that suggested weapons technology generations ahead of anything in the galactic arsenal. "Sir reported, we've lost primary weapons, navigation systems, and long-range communications. Life support is functioning, but we're effectively dead in space." Similar reports came in from across the Council fleet. One by one, the galaxy's most advanced warships were being reduced to helpless hulks drifting through space. The humans weren't just winning the battle, they were demonstrating complete technological superiority while showing remarkable restraint in their use of that advantage. "Council fleet," Admiral Torres broadcast, "this engagement is concluded. Your vessels will be escorted to the edge of the system where you can effect repairs and contact your respective governments. Any attempt to resume hostile actions will result in the complete destruction of your forces." The aftermath of the battle would reshape galactic politics for centuries to come. The Council's most powerful fleet hadn't been destroyed. It had been systematically dismantled by a species they had underestimated so completely that their intelligence failures would become textbook examples of strategic blindness. But the real shock came in the weeks that followed, as the galaxy waited for reports from the surviving Council forces. The escorts Admiral Torres had promised appeared as scheduled, helping the damaged Council ships reach the system's edge where they could begin emergency repairs. However, as the disabled vessels attempted to contact their home governments, they discovered that their communication systems weren't just damaged, they had been completely rewritten. Every message they sent, every report they attempted to transmit, Every desperate plea for reinforcement was intercepted by systems they couldn't detect or bypass. The galaxy heard nothing back because the humans had ensured that nothing could be sent. The Council's greatest fighters hadn't just been defeated, they had been completely cut off from the rest of galactic civilization. For all intents and purposes, they had simply vanished into the void. Months later, the few survivors who eventually made it home carried stories so extraordinary that most governments dismissed them as trauma-induced fantasies. Tales of human technology that seemed to violate known physics, weapons that could target ships in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and most disturbing of all, the suggestion that humanity had been watching and learning from galactic civilization far longer than anyone had suspected. The truth was both simpler and more complex than the survivors reported. Humanity had indeed been preparing for this confrontation, but not through the kind of conventional military buildup the Council had expected. Instead, they had done what humans did best. They had studied their potential opponents, identified weaknesses in established doctrine, and developed completely new approaches to warfare that rendered traditional advantages meaningless. The galaxy's best fighters had been deployed exactly as planned. They simply discovered that in the vast complexity of interstellar politics, sometimes the players had the most dangerous games to play. And sometimes, being heard from again was a privilege that had to be earned through wisdom rather than strength. In the end, the silence that followed the Battle of New Geneva became humanity's most effective diplomatic tool. The galaxy learned to negotiate rather than threaten, to offer partnership rather than demand submission, because the alternative was to simply disappear into the same void that had swallowed the Council's greatest military asset. Humanity had announced their arrival on the galactic stage not with words, but with the profound silence that followed when those who would oppose them simply stopped being heard from altogether.